I'm Anthony. I'm on a 1,000-week journey to upgrade life, my life, and hopefully the lives of others as well. This is week number 2 out of the 1,000, so we've got 998 weeks to go. It's late Sunday, and didn't really want to make a video summarizing the week, but I'm committed to doing this 1,000-week journey and doing it consistently, so here I am to step up and give account of the week. It's been an interesting week, but it's been a week in which there haven't been a whole lot of big stories to report. When I had idealized thinking about this project early on, I thought, wow, I'm going to have stories about fashion and food and professional development. Like every week, we're going to make progress on all of these dimensions. This week did not reflect that ideal type of thinking. But it was still a good week because it was a week of focus. And sometimes I get really zoned into making improvements in a certain area, and the other parts of life just don't matter for that time frame, and that's fine. This week, I really focused in on developing my timeline, and in particular, the presidential history section of the timeline. So I made a video that showed what that presidential timeline looked like. And then I came back and I gave a recolored version of that. So I put the Republicans in red, I put the Democrats in blue. Then you can go back and take a look at that video. That color coding really helped to break down visually the history of the US presidency. And it was fascinating, just illuminating, especially when you look at the relationship between Joe Biden's age, at the age of 78, taking over as the president, compared with the past history of the other 45 presidents. So that got me thinking a little more in depth about filling out that chart, because I don't have all of the boxes for all of the presidents filled out in terms of what they did every month of their lives. But I'm getting close in terms of just very general descriptions of here's where they were born, here's where they spent the first 5 years of their lives, here's what they went to elementary school, here's what they went to college, here are the major steps of professional development they took before they became president, and then here's generally what they did after their office. Almost all of that is filled in for almost all the presidents. So my next goal is to read through all 46 of the presidential biographies, and actually probably more than that, because biographies are slanted. Some are strongly from the right, some are strongly from the left, and so I'll probably need to read through multiple sources. The one that I just happened to grab this week that was sitting here waiting for me to read was Ron Chernow's wonderful book, Grant, about Ulysses S. Grant. And I've made it through probably the first 150 pages of this. It's a fascinating story that reminded me of a saying that I heard Donald Trump say, and that's simply, once a chump, always a chump. And basically the idea behind that is, if you're not a winner early in life, then you're never going to turn out to be a winner later in life. If your cream doesn't rise to the top by the time you're in your early 20s, then, by the time you're 50 or 60 or 70, there's just no hope for you, because, past performance is the best indicator of future performance. Not the case with Ulysses S. Grant. This guy was a failure at many things, atrocious failure, up until the point that he really took hold of the Union Army during the Civil War. And I won't go through the whole history, but failure in business, failure in agriculture, failure in business relationships. The guy just seemed to be inept at so many things. But yet, when he was put in the position of being a general, of being a commander, of doing the military thing, the guy was second to none. I mean, it's like he's a nobody, but when he gets put in that situation, he's like Tom Brady all of a sudden and just excels. So that's fascinating to me. It's like situational effectiveness. And outside of that situation, there's just not a whole lot to write home about. Anyway, that fascinates me. And I'm just curious about people who really could excel and be amazing, but they're not in the right situation. So matching people up with the conditions that feed into their strengths is something that I find interesting, and something that I want to reflect more about myself. What do I need to do to put myself in the best situations to make a progress that I've not made before in my life? So anyway, I'm through part 1 of Grant, the first 150 pages, and look forward to finishing this book here probably within the next couple of weeks, and then moving on to the other biographies. By the time my presidential timeline is done, and I've got all 46 presidents really accounted for in detail, I think I will have a sense of the flow of history and be able to see connections on multiple levels that even people who are dedicated presidential historians might not be able to see, because they don't have that really in-depth bird's eye view of the whole picture. And that got me thinking. I think there's potential for me to develop some fascinating presentations that I could take on the road around the country to any presidential museum, or any place that's meeting that has a focus on the presidency, and deliver presentations tailored toward that particular president, illuminating the context, the historical context around it. Just like, for example, Grant, when he was in the Mexican-American War, he played cards with Franklin Pierce, who ended up becoming president. And so, again, fascinating connections between these that I'll be able to explore. So I want to do the presidents, but I also want to do some other topics. And I'm not a historian. I find this fascinating because it explains so much of life and what has brought us up to this point. I also want to look at art, the French Impressionist, by studying the parallel biographies of a lot of those key people, and again, pulling out those connections that would be fascinating. I might also look at classical music. That could be interesting to look at, and to see who influenced whom, and maybe some people in literature. The Reformation might be an option as well, to look at Luther and Calvin and Zwingli and all of those people, and see how they developed in history. Probably some of the thinkers and the artists of the Renaissance as well would be a good period. So anyway, if you happen to see this and you've got good ideas for clusters of thinkers and writers and artists and political figures that you think would be interesting to see pulled together, please comment in the comment section below in the video, and would love to think about that. So anyway, that's been the big focus. I've been spending a lot of my time really thinking about that project and developing that project. Another thing I'm thinking about doing is potentially, and this is a big transition, potentially moving from the Fort Worth area, where I've been here since 2013. And part of that is due to COVID. The world has just shut down for me. I've been an event photographer, I've been a portrait photographer, but I think my last shoot that I had was maybe last March or so. And usually it's, December, January, February that are pretty slow anyway. So we're going on about a year in which I've really had no business coming in. And I believe that business would pick up if I stayed here. But at the same time, there's this lull that has just put things on pause to such an extent that I've been able to step back and reconsider my life here in Fort Worth. So I'm looking at options. I'm looking at a very specific option to move about 1,000 miles away and to expand a part of my photography business that I really haven't done much with. But if I get into more specific details of that, I'm working on planning that I might share some of that here and incorporate it into the Upgrade theme that I've got going on. So that's really what I've got going on here. It's just working on those long-term projects and working to establish a vision for the future and action plans to get there. So week number 2, I'll see you back here next week for hopefully some cool content for week number 3. The Marsala chai that I made last week was wonderful. The video was up. There's tons of videos I found on YouTube for Marsala chai. Really enjoyed it. It was really good with sugar. When I substituted it with, I think, Swerve, it kind of tasted like an off-brand version of chai. Wasn't the greatest. So real sugar was best with that, just in limited quantities. And I might end up doing some more cooking this week. We'll see. I don't know. So anyway, thank you for joining me. I'm Anthony, and keep upgrading.